What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on this beautiful Tuesday? Recording a little podcast that's known as 3 and Out. I'm John Middlekauff, and we're going to talk a little football because I saw a clip of Justin Fields talking about his mindset going into a quarterback competition in his mind. And I got to give him credit because I think attacking it not as the backup, but as I'm competing for the starting job is the right way to approach it. I watched Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh talk, have a couple thoughts there, and wanted to dive in on this lawsuit. Jaden Rashada, who's now at Georgia, quarterback who was once upon a time offered $13+ million. Turns out there wasn't any actual money there. And just some overall thoughts on the NIL and the world of shady business and the realities that we've all experienced, maybe not at that number, but of broken promises. And that'll be a theme a little bit of the show. Promises. They can be hollow, especially in the sports world. So we will dive into some little football. Very, very excited. A lot going on. All these guys are in locker rooms, on the field. So this is a fun time for the old National Football League. Not for Florida and Billy Napier, who is clearly under the gun, and we'll dive into that situation. But before we dive in, obviously, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, in the official ticketing app of this podcast, known as Gametime. And I've been using Gametime for a long time, getting tickets to sporting events, concerts. If you want to go get a laugh, enjoy yourself, smile, comedy shows, they have you covered. You just type in the venue, the event, the artist, the comedian. You can search by price point, very easy to use. They got flash deals, tells you exactly what's a good deal, what's a bad deal. You can search by individual tickets, by multiple tickets. Like I said, I've been hammering this app, download that bad boy, Gametime, for a long time, promo code John. But take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code John for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Last time I talked to Coward was when the schedule release came out, and he looked at the Steelers schedule and he basically welcomed Mike Tomlin to the broadcasting booth because he thinks it's going to be a difficult season for the Steelers when you look at their schedule. Now, I wouldn't go that far, not because I don't think Mike Tomlin, if he left Pittsburgh, got fired, would be not a good broadcaster. Obviously, everyone would be lined up for his services because I think other teams would be lined up to hire him. And I think if he chose to stay in football, if this season went poorly and the Steelers, which never move on from coaches, chose to do that, he'd get another job in a New York Minute. Some people have commented, don't worry, Tomlin is a lock to win 9 games, not any less and not any more. Here's what I think, though, because their quarterback situation the last couple years was a joke. And it's tough to transition from a legendary player like Roethlisberger. Look at the Falcons. They went through it. The Colts went through it when Andrew Luck kind of suddenly retired. It's not easy to replace that player, that situation. You can get stuck in no man's land very quickly. And they made a draft pick, which obviously they regretted, taking Kenny Pickett with the 20th pick, who that year, we just had 6 quarterbacks go in the top 12. Kenny Pickett was the first quarterback off the board. So when you factor in quarterback inflation, if you're going to go 20, 5, 10, 20 years ago, that guy's going potentially like 3rd round, which I thought that was his level of play. And he is currently the backup on the Philadelphia Eagles. But I gave them credit because they had to kind of swing for the fences. And they were able to do it in a very cheap manner. They're paying Russell Wilson $1 million a year. They traded a 6th-round pick for Justin Fields. Now, part of getting Russell Wilson's services was essentially Mike Tomlin telling him he was a starting quarterback. It's not a binding agreement, and we'll get into one of those when it comes to the NIL situation, which many are not either. It's just words. And anyone that has functioned in any industry that gets a promise from a boss, from a partner, from someone you are trying to lock up, if you're a sales guy, knows it's meaningless. It does not matter. And I have said this over and over, that Russell Wilson has zero equity with the franchise. If they start poor, if he's dinking and dunking, if he doesn't play well in training camp, the conversations will immediately start. And Justin Fields today was interviewed in the locker room, and he essentially said, I don't plan on sitting on the bench all season. I don't plan on holding a clipboard. Those weren't his exact words, but he views this as a competition, as he should, because the opportunity is there. And I've said all along, the NFL, probably more than any other league, is the power of the fan base, because when you're not playing well, they get very loud in the stadium, obviously. They are constantly calling into the local radio station. The newspaper reporters, this is not the NBA where everyone holds your hand. They will destroy you. And that's where the owners listen. That's what the owners watch. So they don't want to watch poor play, especially with someone they haven't invested much in. Because when you're an owner and you pay a guy a lot of money, like Arthur Blank's going to want to watch Kirk Cousins play. Why? He just gave him $100 million. He gave him like a $50 million bonus. Like that money already went into his account. So I want to see what I just paid for. But the Steelers are paying Russell Wilson nothing. And these last 3 years have not gone well. I don't give a shit what his stats say. What he used to be, he's nowhere near that guy anymore. And now he comes to a place where making the playoffs is something they've been doing for 40 years. But not winning any playoff games is a problem. They play in, arguably, when healthy, the best division in football. And I think Russell Wilson is in trouble from the jump. Not because I think Justin Fields is that great a player. He has not been yet. But there's an unknown there. Like, we know what Russell is now. Gives you 25 touchdowns, dinks and dunks, and you lose a lot of games. He hasn't been a winning player now for a while. Doesn't mean he can't get back to that guy, but history would say usually when you fall off a cliff, you don't come storming back. And if I'm Justin Fields, I go with this mindset in OTAs, in training camp. I plan on starting week 1. Now, obviously, you're going to have to show it in practice. You're going to have to show it in these preseason games. But there are things he can do that the other guy just cannot do. And because of the unknown, like, what if Arthur Smith, what if our offense, what if our culture can change this guy? I'd rather see this than that. So Russell Wilson was going to start, obviously, in Seattle, but when they traded him to Denver because of the contract, he was basically on scholarship. That's what these massive quarterback contracts essentially are. So I'm very hesitant with Trevor Lawrence or Tua. Like, be careful before you sign one of these deals because you're all in. And most coaches and teams, front offices, don't have the juice Sean Payton does to be like, just get rid of him. Now, Sean was lucky he didn't sign that contract. Like, it wasn't his idea. So it was easy for him to be like, we got to get out of this business. But owners don't like doing that. It happens never, right? Matt Ryan, they ate a bunch of money. That was a disaster. This Russell Wilson situation financially is a disaster for Denver. But there is no disaster here with Russell Wilson because they're not on the hook for anything. So Justin Fields, to me, we're going to see him this year. I just think the question is when. And I think all eyes are on Russell Wilson, right? His ability in training camp, when the bullets start flying, in the practices, in the preseason games, and early on in the season. Like, they start 0-2, like, yeah, put Justin Fields in. Like, I think it will be that quick. And that has never been the case for this player because he's never been in this situation. And the moment you start moving around teams, the equity you have is less and less. So I think the situation is something worth monitoring. It's going to be a story that we talk about. because this guy's scholarship is over. And now the competition, Mike Tomlin said a lot of things, and then he's pivoted. So I think his words mean little to nothing in terms of Russell Wilson feeling safe, and Justin Fields knows it. Like, he knows coming in. And the other thing, he's going to have the opportunity, like, he gets to practice against this guy every day in drills. They rotate in and out, and you can make an impression because both of you come in with the same slate. Russell's resume is much longer, but in the NFL, no one gives a shit about that. What have you done for me lately? Aaron Rodgers said it today. He said, essentially, if we don't play well, if I don't play well, we're all out of here. I think it's one of the most relatable things about the NFL. If in our jobs we don't produce, you're fired. Like, it's pretty period, point blank, end of story for most of our roles. If you're a sales guy, if you're a podcaster, if you're a real estate, like, you will go on, you will not make any money. And most people are at-will employees, and they can be thrown to the curb at any moment. It's part of the setup of our society. And these other sports no longer have that. In baseball, when you sign a long-term contract, in the NBA, when you sign a long-term contract, that money is coming no matter what. That's why guys don't get cut in those sports. In the NFL, if you suck, no matter what your name is, you're discarded. You're benched. And people lose their job. Coaches have to win. Players have to play well. I mean, it's just a simple fact. And I think you feel it with the Steelers, right? There is tangible pressure on this organization this year. And I said last year, listen, I don't think Mike Tomlin's a bad coach. I think sometimes it's okay for a change. Ask Andy Reid what being fired and changing organizations meant for his career. Changed the way everyone looked at him. Now he's viewed as like the chubby Bill Walsh. He became a living legend. And he was a damn good coach for Philly. But this Chiefs run, hell, what he was doing with Alex Smith, let alone when he got Patrick Mahomes, changed the conversation around him. Mike Tomlin, like, getting fired is not the worst thing, but he knows it. And I think they could have made a change last year. They didn't. They're a very loyal organization. But I'd be stunned if they win 8 or 9 games. And the reason is not that they can't win 8 or 9 games, but if they just do the same thing over and over, it's like, what's the point of all this? And I think when you look at him, he is not going to have a long leash with this quarterback. Look at Arthur Smith. When he first was working with the Titans and became the coordinator, like, they went through a pretty quick transition. They were loyal to Mariota, and then boom, benched him Ryan Tannehill. And it changed the trajectory of all those guys in Tennessee, including Arthur Smith's career. So sometimes you got to kind of swing for the fences, and that's ultimately what Justin Fields is. Because I think, simply put, what Russell Wilson has been in recent, years is just not going to be good enough. It's just that simple. We are this close to crowning an NBA champ. And with action heating up on the court, it's even hotter at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. There are only so many games left, and DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boost, and so much more. Don't miss out, or you'll have to wait until the next NBA season to place your bets. It's super easy for first-timers to get started. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, select your squad, and place your first bet. It's that simple. New to DraftKings? Listen up. New customers can get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500. Just deposit at least $5, and you'll get a bonus bet back equal to your first bet if it doesn't hit. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get a no-sweat bet up to $1,500 if your first bet doesn't hit. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I watched some of Rodgers. I watched some of Robert Saleh, who's just a good-looking bald guy. They obviously have a lot of talented players on their team. The problem is a lot of their high-end guys that aren't the young draft picks are all injury question marks. And the pressure on this organization because of their quarterback, who I think is right up there now. If Tom, is not an NFL player anymore, the two most famous guys in the league are Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. And you could say Travis Kelce has thrown his hat into the ring because of the relationship he has with Taylor Swift. But he was an all-time great before he ever started dating her. And by no means would you have said he's the most famous guy in the league. Now he's in that conversation, but it's really more for Taylor. When you just talk about football and just superstardom, it's Aaron and Patrick. And I bought into the Jets last year, picked them to win the division. I even kind of sold myself. I'm like, well, if he's healthy, could they get to 9 or 10 wins? I've said I like the way their schedule starts. Not the Niner game, that's tough, but then you get the Titans, then you get a short week with the Patriots. You're 2-1 off the mini bye. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. But the pressure on this organization, how weird things get with this team. Like sometimes things just get weird certain places. I saw it firsthand for the Raiders forever. Just a place where things get weird. I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, some of it understandable. You're always talking about moving. You finally move. You run through coaches, the Gruden situation. But it's just stuff happens to the Raiders that just doesn't happen to the other teams. And whether that's the organizational kind of motto, whether that's the owner, I don't know. But the same thing with the Jets. And I think it usually comes back to ownership, right? Like we could argue all day long about the Steelers. Are they good enough? Are they not? But their organization isn't that weird. It's pretty normal and consistent. Weird shit happens with the Jets. And Robert Saleh's refusing to talk about Nathaniel Hackett, saying he addressed it at the owners' meetings. And it's just always something. And I think one issue they have, most people don't think Nathaniel Hackett's any good. And when you don't have a good coordinator on offense in 2024, it can be a problem. I don't give a shit if Aaron Rodgers is fully healthy because we know how dependent they are. Morgan Moses is not even practicing. He's not healthy. Tyron Smith, great player, but he's just been injured a lot. One of their big offseason signings, Mike Williams, obviously tore his ACL last year, is not able to practice right now. Aaron benefited a lot from tearing that Achilles, 5 minutes into the season, gave him a long runway. Now we're 7-8 months removed from that injury, even though he said he was going to be ready by the end of the season. I never believed that for a second, but he clearly is able to full go because of the timing of the injury. It is difficult to overcome just dysfunction and chaos. It's why a lot of people, when you look at having trouble as they get older, come from chaotic backgrounds. Like it's hard. That stuff follows you for a long time. And I think the Jets have battled this now for 15 plus years. And you could argue for well longer, right? They did have a moment with Rex Ryan, but it wasn't sustainable. And one thing that's pretty clear in the NFL to sustain success, it's usually based on ownership. And I just think this has a chance to get weird. You're always getting asked questions about things outside of football. Robert Saleh. One also problem for the Jets is we have no clue if their coach is any good. And based on recent history, you would say he's not a very good coach. I'm talking about a head coach. And so I always say, everyone gets really excited about when you hire some hotshot coordinator, Mike McDonald. I listened to the Bussin' with the Boys, had on Brian Callahan, who's an impressive guy. But he brought something up. He said, I got to be careful about the tone of my voice now. He's like, I went into one of my assistants' rooms and was just busting his balls. And the guy kind of gave me the look like, God, am I in trouble or something? And it kind of clicked in his mind like, I'm the boss now. My words impact my assistant coaches, my players much differently than when I was the coordinator, where my relationship and my connection to them was just much different. And I remember hearing Mike McDaniel talk about this maybe to Rich Eisen, or he was on a podcast probably a year ago, saying he realized early on being a head coach, just his mood around the office impacted everyone else because everyone's looking at you. And Robert Saleh is a happy guy. Nathaniel Hackett's definitely a happy-go-lucky guy. And I think they try to be very positive. But I read an article today that the Patriots, one of their players who loves Bill, who's like, I miss Bill. I like getting yelled at, but that doesn't really happen around here anymore. It's much more positive on the practice field. And I think that shit's really, really overrated. All these guys come from colleges where they're getting coached hard. Guys, players want to be pushed because getting pushed, you usually get the best out of you. And I think one thing the league has done hardcore, a lot of these owners have tried to get like, we want positive PDs. No swearing at guys. Well, if you're swearing at guys and you're a bad coach, none of it matters. Just like if you're friendly to guys and you're a bad coach, none of it matters. Do you know what you're doing? Because this business obviously is really, really hard to have success in. And to me, my biggest question mark, besides just the players being older and in injuries when it comes to a lot of the Jets' core veteran players, is does their coaching staff have any clue what they're doing? And if they don't, the owner gets involved. And then it immediately gets weird. But as Aaron Rodgers says, if we do not win this year, we're all done. And if Rodgers doesn't look good, if they lose games, like everyone's getting fired. We all know that. And Rodgers' career probably ends. It's why they're probably one of the more fascinating stories in the NFL because of the combustion factor. Like the Bears are a fascinating story, how good Caleb's going to be. But like ultimately, if they underachieve and win 8 games and miss the playoffs, Eberflus will get fired and they'll get new coaches. We know the players aren't going away, right? Jalen Johnson under contract, Sweat's under contract, Caleb just drafted, Rome just drafted, DJ Moore under contract. Like those guys, Ryan Poles is not going anywhere. With the Jets, it's like every fucking thing's on the line. The GM, the coach, the players. Besides like Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson, it feels pressure packed. And it's going to start week 1 against the 49ers. They're an underdog and they should lose that game. But then immediately, can you right the ship and get 2-1? It's what's cool about the NFL. We all know what's on the line. eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old. And my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back. And you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit. Because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not. But I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. One of my favorite business quotes of all time was Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. Just a fantastic book. I listened because I'm an audiobook guy, but if you want to read it, listen to it. It's just a fantastic listen on kind of the origin, the history of Nike. And he said something in that book that I'll never forget because it's so true, that business is a war without bullets. And anyone that's, I would say, been in the workforce, not like the government, and you could argue that is too, but like in private sector jobs, I think we all agree it can be pretty ruthless. And you see shit all the time that isn't quote unquote fair. Back to promises. Promises get made all the time and they never come through. When I first got into the podcasting game back in like 2016, for a couple years, I was working with a startup company and some shady shit happened. I forget the exact number, but was owed tens of thousands of dollars that never came my way. And it was an incredible learning experience now looking back. But at the time, obviously sucked. I was pretty dependent on that money that, like I said, did not exist. Whether it never existed, whether it got funneled other places, I don't know. But one thing my dad taught me a long time, it's the company basically went under. It's pointless to sue anyone without that doesn't have any money. It costs you. And Peter Guber, longtime Hollywood guy who's one of the part owners of the Warriors, has a quote that essentially says, "There are no rules, but you break them at your own peril." And I think War Without Bullets and that quote sum up the business world. Buckle the fuck up because everything is on the line in terms of be ready for anything. You are going to get screwed. It is inevitable. And the Jaden Rashada story with Florida has so many elements to that. Promises, I would imagine, in the NIL world get thrown around all the time. The amount of kids that are promised money that they never see is probably happening well over 50% of the time. Promises are not kept. And he was once upon a time promised over $13 million, which, separate from the player, if you are willing to pay a prospect $13 million, I'm going to bet against your program because that is insanity. That is moronic. If you want to give $13 million to Caleb Williams after his freshman year or an established player in college, while a lot, understandable. But to me, giving recruits millions of dollars is going to work out, I would say, a small percentage of the time. And I think we've seen that. And a lot of teams have funneled much more of their resources and assets into the transfer portal because it's like buying a free agent. You have tape of them playing Power 5. So Jaden Rashada, who is now, he was going to go to Florida, then he was going to go to Miami, ended up at Arizona State because that's where his dad played. He's now at Georgia after last year did not go that well, is suing Florida for millions of dollars. And he's represented by Rusty Hardin, who, pretty famous attorney. Once upon a time, I remember first time I heard his name was when I was a kid and he was representing Roger Clemens. But here's the thing. These NIL promises are just that, promises. Now, you could argue that it's taking advantage of young people that have no clue what's going on, and you throw out numbers. 13, my first reaction years ago when the 13 million number got thrown out was laughter. Like, this is the most over-the-top fake number in the history of fake numbers. And part of it was Florida was trying to swim because Miami had offered him 9 million, so they wanted to offer more. The coach then, I think, essentially made a promise to him. But that's the business we're in right now. That's the promises that are getting made all over the country that are then never lived up to. And you could say, well, it sucks for him. That money was never there in the first place. It literally didn't exist. The Florida, turns out, didn't even have the money, the NIL conglomerate or whatever they're considered, did not have the cash. And I think when you look at this situation, like, you can sue the school, but the schools have nothing to do, like, the program has nothing to do with the NIL collective. In theory, obviously they all do because you're paying to play. But this is what happens when you have a startup situation, which essentially NIL is. It becomes the wild, wild west. And anytime you have the wild, wild west, you're going to get a lot of people lying. Because why would you not? There aren't any rules. I think it's safe to say that this lawsuit probably won't come to fruition. He won't end up getting any money out of this situation. I don't blame him for being pissed off, because if promises are made at large numbers you think are coming and then they don't come, I've been there. You've been there. We've all been there. You get mad. You get angry. And if you have the resources to sue someone that you think has money, like Jaden has now, you can try to take action. But in these he said, she said situations, it can become very difficult. Now, separating the situation to Florida, they clearly look like an embarrassment. They look bad. Their coach, Billy Napier, is probably on one of the hottest seats in the country when it comes to major programs. If I was a betting man right now, I would say it doesn't go great for Florida this year. He's fired, and Lane Kiffin is their next head coach. But separate from that, these universities, and the other problem is, like, you don't want to have to deal with this if you're the athletic director or the president. So this is not a great look for Billy Napier. But for me, any coach making promises to do whatever they have to do to get a kid to sign, like, welcome to college sports, kind of part of the deal. Think how long it happened in football, making a promise to a guy you're going to be a starter right away. Then the moment they sign, you got to earn your spot. Or we told you were going to play wide receiver. We're going to start you at corner. Obviously, there's much more emotional now when these numbers get thrown out. But one thing, talking to all these people in college football, the numbers that consistently get thrown out are such bullshit. They're so fake. Why wouldn't you throw out fake numbers? You just want to get the guy to commit and come and then deal with the ramifications after. So I'm not condoning this behavior, but you would be naive to think this isn't happening daily in college football. So this is a good life lesson for these guys. Like, a promise doesn't mean shit. Put it on paper. When's that wire coming through? Because until it comes through, we've all been there. Hey, let's do this deal. Okay. Easy to say, easy to talk about. Are we actually going to do it? Can I get your bank account information? Can I get you to sign the piece of paper right here? But that's what the NIL situation currently is. Just the wild, wild west of real money, fake money, lies. And the problem is, and this is why the coaches keep complaining about it, is they want regulation. Well, there's no one to regulate it. No one respects the NCAA. How could you? It's a fucking clown organization. All these conferences are in different worlds. Everyone's competing against each other. One thing the NFL has, everyone's under the same umbrella. Everyone is profiting together. The better we do, the better I do. That's not the way in college football. And it's why most people, I would say, assume that one day we'll get an NFL-style operation. 40, 50 teams at the Power 5 level will all be under the same umbrella. Pretty easy to kind of figure out what teams will be the haves and the have-nots. But I don't feel we're that close to getting there. And until we get there, we're going to have these situations where kids are, quote unquote, getting lied to constantly. And it's one thing to get lied to, like I said. Hey, it happened when I was a kid all the time. And even when I worked in recruiting, a guy would desperately want to play quarterback. We're like, he can't really throw, but God, he's a good athlete. Tell him he's going to play quarterback, get him here, and we plan on moving him to safety or running back. Happened constantly. A lot of those guys end up playing in the NFL. But that's a lie. It's like, and once you were there, you couldn't transfer. So you're kind of stuck. And then you're like, I'm actually a pretty good running back. All of a sudden I become a star or an all-conference guy. Life's not bad. It's another thing when people tell you and your parents or your agents, we got $2 million coming to you. And then you're looking in your bank account and the money is not there. But I just think this situation, we're only at the beginning of the craziness. We're only at the beginning of the I hate even the word regulated, because I don't necessarily know how you, quote unquote, regulate all of this, but we're not even close to that. We're in a situation where everyone's just flying by the seat of their pants. And when you fly by the seat of your pants and there aren't any rules or regulations, you do whatever the fuck you want. Because Peter Gruber's right. Break the rules. Because most people that are successful break rules. You just better be careful not to get caught. Now, the thing here is, like, you're allowed to offer money, right? So he's not technically breaking any rules. He just broke a promise of the money that was going to come. And I just think these situations, it's kind of an ugly, like, I think we all agree, like, pay him. I don't care. Get money. I've never been one of those people who resent anyone with money. I think you see a lot of that, especially on the internet. Such a terrible loser mindset to have. But I do, these type of situations just become kind of like, ugh. Like, can we figure this out? Because this is the type of stuff that just eventually turns people off. I've seen it in golf. It's like you're just talking about money, 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 money. When are the games? Where are the players? Like, who's coaching the team? And that's where I think college football is kind of in this weird spot where all these coaches complain about it. Because these guys, some guys don't want to technically break the rules, but you don't have a choice. Because if you're not, you're going to get fucking lapped. You have no shot. A scout told me like a year ago that in college football, there's something called dark money. Because if I give you an NIL, let's just pick an even number, $100,000. Well, that's on paper that the IRS knows about. So you're going to get taxed on that money, right? Like 1099. I'm sending you 1099, 100 grand. You're going to owe, depending on where you live, 30, 40 grand. Well, the dark money, which a lot of these schools, the big boys are dealing with, is like, hey, we'll give you 100 grand NIL, but we'll also give you 100 grand untraceable. So technically, I'm giving you 200 grand, but you're going to bank 150 of it instead of giving you 200 grand where you'd bank 120 or 110. So the whole thing is shady, but of course it is. It's the nature of the beast when there aren't rules.